Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The smell of motor oil clung to Jack Merrick's calloused hands despite the thorough scrubbing he'd given them before leaving his shop. 42 years of life had etched permanent lines around his eyes, deepened by squinting at engine blocks and customer invoices for the past 20 years. The cold December air bit through his canvas jacket as he trudged up the walkway to his modest two-story home on the outskirts of Pineville, Oregon. Christmas Eve. The neighboring houses blazed with colorful lights and decorations. Jack's home stood dark. He paused at the front door, key hovering near the lock. No lights inside. No TV glow. No Christmas music. The silence struck him as wrong, but not unexpected. The lock turned with a familiar click. Jack stepped inside, immediately sensing the emptiness. "Rose." His voice echoed through the dark entryway. "Reed." The house answered with silence. Jack flipped on the lights, revealing the living room just as he'd left it that morning except for Rose's favorite jacket missing from the coat rack. Jack moved to the kitchen, where a single bulb cast harsh shadows across the countertop. A folded piece of paper sat propped against the fruit bowl. His name, written in Rose's looping handwriting, marked the front. His fingers felt numb as he unfolded it. "Spent your $8,500 loan on a trip with my mother. Take care of Reed, and oh sorry. No love you." No explanation. The loan. His business loan for new equipment. The money he'd secured just last week to upgrade his shop. Gone. A soft scraping sound made Jack turn. His son Reed sat at the kitchen table, fork pushing cold leftovers around a plate. The 16-year-old's shaggy dark hair fell across his forehead, obscuring eyes that were so like his mother's it sometimes hurt Jack to look at them. "Hey, Dad." Reed's voice cracked slightly. He'd gone through a growth spurt this year, shooting up to nearly Jack's height. "When did she leave?" Jack asked, the note crumpling in his fist. "This morning, after you went to work." Reed set down his fork. Grandma Maribel picked her up. They had suitcases. Jack closed his eyes for a moment, steadying himself against the counter. Not a surprise shopping trip. Not a visit to a friend. Suitcases meant something else entirely. "She called me after lunch," Reed continued, eyes fixed on his plate. "Said she needed a break from everything. I should help out more while she's gone." Jack opened his eyes, studying his son. The boy's shoulders were hunched, his expression carefully neutral, a look Jack recognized from the mirror on days when showing pain wasn't an option. "You okay?" Jack asked. Reed looked up then, his gaze direct and surprisingly fierce. "We'll fix this, Dad." Something shifted in Jack's chest, pride mingled with a father's instinct to protect. This wasn't a burden he wanted his son to carry. "There's nothing to fix, Reed." She made her choice. Jack moved to the refrigerator, pulled out a beer, and cracked it open. The bitter taste matched his mood. "We'll get by. Always have." "She took money that wasn't hers," Reed said, pushing his plate away. "That's not just a choice. That's stealing." Jack took another long swallow of beer, letting the sharp reality of the situation sink in. $8,500. His loan. Their future security. "Get some sleep," Jack said finally. "It's Christmas Eve. We'll figure it out tomorrow." Reed shook his head. "Can't sleep. I'll just be up thinking about it." Jack nodded, understanding all too well. "Want to watch something?" They ended up on the couch, watching an old action movie they'd seen a dozen times before. Neither paid much attention to the explosions on screen. Jack's mind churned through options, calculations, and a cold, growing certainty. This had been coming for a long time. Rose hadn't been happy for years. He'd chosen to ignore the signs, to work harder, to hope things would get better on their own. Now she'd forced his hand. Jack glanced at Reed, who had finally dozed off on the other end of the couch. The boy deserved better than this mess. "Merry Christmas," Jack whispered to the quiet room, raising his beer in a bitter toast to the emptiness his wife had left behind. Jack woke with a crick in his neck from falling asleep on the couch. Pale winter sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting thin stripes across the living room floor. Christmas morning. He rubbed his face, grimacing at the stubble scraping his palm. That he made coffee, strong and black, and took it outside to the back porch. The yard was small, but well kept his domain on Sunday afternoons when Rose visited her mother. The wooden steps creaked under his weight as he settled down, steam rising from his mug into the cold morning air. 20 years. Nearly half his life spent with Rose. The memories came unbidden, like flipping through a photo album where the pictures had faded at the edges. They'd met when he was 22, fresh out of technical school with big dreams of owning his own garage. Rose had been 18, working at her uncle's diner and dreaming of escaping their small town. She'd serve him coffee every morning for a month before he worked up the courage to ask her out. Back then, her smile had been enough to make his hands shake. She'd been full of life, laughing at his bad jokes, impressed by his knowledge of engines and machinery. They'd spend their first date in his beaten-up Chevy, parked at the reservoir, talking until sunrise. 6 months later, they were engaged. A year after that, married in a small ceremony that her mother Maribel had complained about endlessly. Too simple, too rustic, not good enough for her daughter. "You could do better," she'd told Rose at the reception, loud enough for Jack to overhear. "He'll never give you the life you deserve." Rose had defended him then, eyes flashing. "I love him, Mom. That's all that matters." The memory soured in Jack's mind, curdling into what came later. The years of Maribel's persistent undermining. The subtle suggestions that Jack wasn't providing enough. The expensive gifts she'd buy Rose that Jack could never match. And Rose had changed. Slowly at first, then more noticeably after Reed was born. The small-town life she'd once claimed to love became confining. Jack's ambitions, the garage he'd built from nothing, the steady income, the modest but comfortable home no longer seemed enough. "Everyone's moving forward except us," she'd said during one of their fights last year. "We're stuck in the same rut while people around us are living. Living, as if what they had wasn't living." But the distance had grown. Rose spent more time with Maribel, more weekends away at shopping trips to Portland. She'd come back with new clothes, new hair, new complaints about their life in Pineville. Jack took another sip of coffee, now lukewarm in the winter air. The first concrete suspicion had come 13 months ago. Rose's phone lighting up with texts late at night. The way she'd angled the screen away from him. Her sudden password protection on a device she'd never bothered to lock before that he'd seen the name once. Kenton, just a glimpse before she'd snatched the phone away, laughing nervously about work stuff. Rose didn't even have a job that required after-hours texts. The screen door creaked behind him. Reed stepped out, hair mussed from sleep, wearing the same clothes from yesterday. "Merry Christmas," the boy said flatly. Jack nodded. "Merry Christmas." Reed sat beside him on the step. "I made eggs if you want some." "Thanks." Jack didn't move. "Sleep okay?" "Not really." Reed picked at a loose splinter in the wooden step. "I kept checking my phone. Mom didn't call." Jack said nothing. Rose hadn't called him either. Not that he'd expected it. "Last night wasn't the first time," Reed said suddenly. "Mom's been hiding things." Jack turned to look at his son. "What do you mean?" Reed's expression tightened. "I saw her bank statements. She's been moving money around. I didn't know about the loan, but I think she's been planning this for a while." A cold weight settled in Jack's stomach. He'd suspected Rose's betrayal was emotional, maybe physical, but financial? That cut deeper somehow. "You shouldn't have to deal with this," Jack said. Reed shrugged. "I'm not a kid anymore, Dad. I can handle it." He paused. "There's something else. I heard her talking to someone named Kenton. On the phone. More than once." The name hung in the air between them. Confirmation of what Jack had already guessed. "How long?" Jack asked. "At least 6 months that I know of." Reed looked at his hands. "I should have told you sooner." Jack shook his head. "Not your responsibility." They sat in silence, watching their breath fog in the cold air. Christmas morning with no presents, no laughter, just the hollow space where their family had been. "What are you going to do?" Reed finally asked. Jack drained the last of his coffee. "First, I'm going to find out exactly what we're dealing with. Then we'll decide." His tone must have carried something new, a hardness that hadn't been there before, because Reed looked at him with sudden intensity. "You're not going to try to get her back, are you?" The question struck Jack as strangely perceptive. In the past, he might have. He'd overlooked so much, worked harder, tried to be what Rose wanted while still remaining true to himself. A losing battle. "No," Jack said firmly. I'm not. Relief washed over Reed's face. Good, because she doesn't deserve another chance. Jack stood, joints protesting after sitting in the cold. Let's eat those eggs before they get cold. I need to make some calls. Jack's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Rudy Jensen's name flashed on the screen. Jack picked up, grateful for the distraction from staring at his empty bank account. Rudy, Merry Christmas, you miserable bastard, came the gruff response. You coming by later? Got a bottle of that whiskey you like. Rudy Jensen had been Jack's friend since they'd served together in their early 20s. Now 45, with a shaved head and perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, Rudy owned the most popular bar in Pineville, the last stop. Not feeling very festive, Jack replied, keeping his voice low so Reed wouldn't hear from the living room. That doesn't sound like you. What's up? The concern in Rudy's voice was immediate. Jack hesitated, then decided there was no point hiding it. Rose left, took a business loan I just secured, went off with her mother. A long whistle carried through the phone. Damn, Jack. When did this happen? Yesterday. Christmas Eve special delivery. You need to get over here, Rudy said firmly. Now, bring the kid if he wants to come. Jack glanced toward the living room, where Reed was mechanically flipping through channels. Not sure that's... Jack, Rudy cut him off. Trust me on this. There's something you need to know. 20 minutes later, Jack and Reed pushed through the heavy wooden door of the last stop. The bar was technically closed for Christmas, but Rudy's truck sat in the parking lot. Inside, the place was empty except for Rudy himself, wiping down glasses behind the bar. Christmas lights strung along the liquor shelves provided most of the illumination, casting multicolored reflections across the polished wood. There he is. Rudy set down a glass and came around the bar, pulling Jack into a rough hug. And Reed, man, you've grown a foot since I saw you last. Reed managed a small smile. Hey, Uncle Rudy, grab a seat. Soda for the kid. Something stronger for you. Rudy asked Jack. Just coffee, Jack said. Need to keep my head clear. Rudy nodded, returning to the bar to pour coffee for Jack and a Coke for Reed. When he'd served them both, he leaned forward on his elbows, expression serious. I should have told you sooner, he began, but I wasn't sure what I was seeing. Jack felt his stomach tighten. What are you talking about? Rose. I saw her getting into some guy's car last week, outside the mall in Westridge. Rudy tapped his fingers against the bar top. Nice car. Too nice. Mercedes or something similar. Reed looked up sharply. Was he in his 30s? Dark hair. Rudy nodded slowly. Yeah. How'd you know? Kenton, Reed said, glancing at his father. I told you she's been talking to him. Jack took a long sip of coffee, letting the hot liquid burn down his throat. You're sure it was Rose? Positive, Rudy confirmed. I called out to her, but she pretended not to hear me. Got in the car quick. That's when I knew something wasn't right. The bar's front door swung open with a gust of cold air. A tall woman with short salt and pepper hair stepped inside, unwinding a scarf from her neck. Gwen, Jack said, surprised to see his older sister. What are you doing here? Gwen Merrick crossed the room with quick, efficient strides the same way she moved through the hospital where she worked as a nurse. At 48, she had the same sharp features as Jack, but with an intensity that could intimidate most people on first meeting. Rudy called me, she said, stopping beside Jack's stool. Said it was important. Jack shot Rudy a look. You call my sister? You need your people around you right now. Rudy said unapologetically. Gwen's keen eyes took in Jack's rumpled appearance and Reed's subdued demeanor. What happened? Jack sighed, then repeated the bare facts. Rose's departure, the stolen loan, the suspicions of infidelity. With each word, Gwen's expression hardened. That manipulative witch, she muttered when he finished. I knew she was trouble from the start. Gwen, Jack warned, glancing at Reed. Don't Gwen me, his sister snapped. Reed's not a baby. He can handle the truth. And the truth is your wife has been playing you for a fool. She pulled up a stool beside him. The question is, what are you going to do about it? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Well, figure it out faster, Gwen said, her voice softening slightly. Don't let her play you. You're better than that. Jack stared into his coffee. It's not that simple. There's the loan, the house. And Reed, his sister finished. Have you thought about what happens if she comes back and tries to take him? Reed set down his glass with a sharp clink. She won't. I wouldn't go. The conviction in his son's voice made Jack look up. There was something different in Reed's expression now, a hardness that reminded Jack of himself at that age. She won't get the chance, Jack said firmly. I'm not letting her take anything else from us. That's more like it. Rudy nodded approvingly. The Jack Merrick I know doesn't roll over for anyone. I need to know everything, Jack said, turning to Reed. All the calls, texts, everything you've noticed. And I need to check our accounts, see what else she might have taken. Reed straightened in his seat. There's more, Dad. I didn't want to say it earlier, but I think she took money from my college fund, too. The words hit Jack like a physical blow. The college fund had been sacred, the one thing they'd both agreed would never be touched. He'd put money in religiously every month since Reed was born. You sure? Jack's voice came out rough. Reed nodded. I saw the statement last week when I was looking for something in your desk. The balance was way lower than it should be. Son of a bitch, Rudy muttered. Gwen laid a hand on Jack's arm. This isn't just about a marriage falling apart anymore. This is theft, plain and simple. Jack nodded slowly, a cold clarity washing over him. This wasn't about saving his marriage or winning Rose back. This was about justice, about protecting what was left of his family. I need a lawyer, he said. I know someone, Gwen replied immediately. Margot Ellison, best divorce attorney in the county. Doesn't put up with any nonsense. And I'll ask around, Rudy added. Find out more about this Kenan character. Jack looked at his son, his sister, his oldest friend, the people who'd stood by him when it counted. A strange sense of relief mixed with his anger. He wasn't alone in this. Thanks, he said simply. All of you. Reed reached over and bumped his father's shoulder lightly. Told you we'd fix this, Dad. For the first time since finding Rose's note, Jack felt the ghost of a smile cross his face. Yeah, I think we will. 3 days after Christmas, Jack sat at his desk in the back office of Merrick Auto Repair, staring at bank statements spread across the worn surface. Outside, the muffled sounds of the shop continued, air tools whining, metal clanging, his two employees talking as they worked. Jack had built this business over 2 decades, turning a rundown garage into the most trusted repair shop in Pineville. Now he was watching Rose's betrayal unfold in numbers and dates. The college fund had been the first discovery. Started when Reed was born, it had accumulated over $45,000 through consistent monthly deposits and careful investments. 2 months ago, Rose had withdrawn $30,000, almost 3/4 of the total. Jack had never thought to check. He'd trusted her. The soft knock at the office door pulled him from his thoughts. Jules Rivera leaned in, wiping her hands on a shop rag. At 35, Jules was Jack's most experienced mechanic, with quick hands and an even quicker mind. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, face smudged with grease from the morning's work. Got the Andersons' truck finished, she reported. That transmission was worse than we thought. Thanks, Jules. Jack shuffled the papers together, but not before Jules caught sight of them. Her expression shifted subtly. Everything okay, boss? Jules had worked for Jack for 8 years. She was more than an employee, she was a friend, had been close with both Jack and Rose. Until Rose had started distancing herself from most of their mutual friends about 2 years back. Not really, Jack admitted. Rose left. Took some money with her. Jules' eyes widened. Shit, Jack. I'm sorry. She stepped fully into the office, closing the door behind her. When did this happen? Christmas Eve. Jack leaned back in his chair. Found out she's been seeing someone. Guy named Kenton. Ring any bells? Jules frowned. Kenton? No, but Rose has been different lately. More secretive. She hesitated. Look, I didn't want to get involved, but I saw her at the Phoenix a couple months back. The Phoenix was an upscale bar in Westridge, the next town over. Not Rose's usual scene, or so Jack had thought. She was with her mother. Jules continued. And they were talking to some guy. Real slick type, you know? Designer, everything, too much cologne. I waved, but Rose acted like she didn't see me. Jack nodded slowly. That fits the pattern. Anything else you remember about him? Just that he was buying them expensive drinks. Jules paused, and that he seemed to be doing most of the talking, like he was selling something. A cold suspicion formed in Jack's mind. Thanks, Jules. That helps. After she left, Jack pulled out his phone and called Reed. Hey, Dad. His son's voice sounded stronger today. How's the project coming? Jack asked. After the meeting at Rudy's bar, Jack had suggested they work on restoring an old truck together, a 1972 Ford that had been sitting in their garage for years. Reed had jumped at the chance. Not bad. Got the carburetor cleaned out. Just trying to figure out why the starter won't engage. Check this solenoid connection, Jack suggested. Listen, I need you to do something for me. Can you look through your mom's things? See if there's anything with this Ken guy's full name. Business card, letter, anything. Already did. Reed replied, his tone matter of fact. Found a receipt in her desk drawer. It's from some investment company. Eagle Summit Ventures. Has the name Ken Murray on it. Jack felt a surge of pride at his son's initiative, followed quickly by concern that Reed was getting too involved. You shouldn't have to play detective, Jack said. I want to. Reed answered firmly. This affects me too, Dad. Jack couldn't argue with that. What kind of investment receipt? Some kind of property thing. $20,000 deposit. The amount hit Jack like a hammer. $20,000, plus the $30,000 from the college fund, plus his $8,000 loan. Nearly $60,000, their entire financial safety net. Dad, you still there? Yeah, Jack managed. I'm here. Good work, son. I'll be home soon. Jack hung up and immediately called Rudy. I need you to find out everything you can about Eagle Summit Ventures and a guy named Ken Murray. Use your connections. Consider it done. Rudy replied without hesitation. What am I looking for? Everything, but especially if there have been any complaints, legal issues. I think this might be more than just an affair. That evening, Jack and Reed worked on the old Ford in their garage, a space heater fighting against the winter chill. The simple, familiar work gave them both something to focus on besides the hollow feeling in the house. Hand me that socket wrench, Jack said, lying on his back beneath the truck. Reed passed it down. Dad, can I ask you something? Shoot, are you disappointed in me for not telling you about Mom earlier? Jack slid out from under the truck, sitting up to look directly at his son. Reed's face was tense, uncertain, a reminder that despite his height and growing maturity, he was still just 16. No, Jack said firmly. Not even a little bit. You were in an impossible position. None of this is on you. Reed nodded, but his expression remained troubled. I feel like I let you down. Like if I'd said something sooner, maybe. This was a long time coming. Jack interrupted. Your mother's choices are her own. Nothing you or I could have said would have changed that. But the money, we'll figure it out. Jack picked up a rag to wipe grease from his hands. Your college fund? I'm sorry about that. I should have been more careful. It's not your fault, Reed said, echoing Jack's earlier words. Besides, I can get scholarships. Work through school. The mature response nearly broke Jack's heart. His son shouldn't have to be thinking about this. You'll go to college, Jack promised. I'll make sure of it. They worked in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the clink of tools and the occasional direction from Jack. In those quiet moments, something strengthened between them, a bond that had always been there, but was solidifying in the face of adversity. I'm disappointed in her, Reed said suddenly. Not just for leaving or taking the money, but for not seeing what she had right here. Jack looked up from the engine to find Reed watching him, eyes serious. You didn't deserve this, Dad. Neither of us did. For the first time, Jack allowed himself to feel the full weight of his anger. Not just at the betrayal or the theft, but at what Rose had done to their son. The way she'd forced him to grow up too quickly. No, Jack agreed, his voice hard with resolve. We didn't, and we're not going to just roll over and take it. Reed smiled slightly, looking remarkably like Jack in that moment. Good, because I don't want you to forgive her. Not ever. Don't worry about that, Jack said grimly. Some things can't be forgiven. Jack sat in a booth at the last stop, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold. The Friday night crowd was starting to trickle in, filling the bar with noise and life, but Jack barely noticed. His focus was on Rudy, who sat across from him with a folder open on the table. You're sure about this? Jack asked, staring at the printouts Rudy had gathered. Checked 3 different sources, Rudy confirmed, tapping a finger on the papers. Eagle Summit Ventures doesn't exist, at least not legally. The address on their letterhead belongs to an empty office in Portland. The phone number goes to a burner. Jack exhaled slowly. And Kenton Murray, that's where it gets interesting. Rudy pulled out another sheet. He's got quite a history. 3 complaints filed against him in the last 5 years for investment fraud, all mysteriously dropped before they went to court. He slid the paper across to Jack. And get this, all 3 women were in their late 30s, early 40s, all going through rough patches in their marriages. The cold feeling in Jack's stomach intensified. He's a calm man. Bingo. Rudy leaned back. My buddy at the sheriff's department says they suspect Murray's hit at least a dozen women across 3 counties. Always the same pattern. He finds unhappy wives, wines and dines them, convinces them to invest in his company. Then he disappears with the cash. Jack stared at the papers, the pieces clicking into place. Rose's secretive behavior, the large withdrawals, her mother's involvement. Wait. Jack looked up sharply. You think Maribel was in on this? Rudy grimaced. Can't prove it, but my gut says yes. The timing's too perfect, and she's always had expensive taste with no visible means to support it. The betrayal expanded, morphed into something even darker. Not just his wife cheating, but a calculated scheme to drain their accounts. I need to talk to Margot, Jack said, referring to the lawyer Gwen had connected him with. Find out what my options are. Already ahead of you. Rudy pulled out his phone. Margot can see you tomorrow morning. 9 sharp. Jack nodded, gratitude mixing with grim determination. Thanks, Rudy. I owe you. Forget it. Rudy's expression was unusually serious. Just promise me one thing. Don't let them get away with this. Not a chance in hell, Jack replied. The next morning, Jack sat in Margot Ellison's office, surrounded by law books and framed credentials. At 50, Margot projected no-nonsense competence, her gray streak hair cut in a practical bob, her gaze direct and analytical as she reviewed the documents Jack had brought. This is an unusual situation, Mr. Merrick, she said finally. Most divorces I handle involve emotional betrayal. This is financial fraud, possibly criminal. What can I do? Jack asked. Several things. Margot set down her pen. First, we file for divorce on grounds of abandonment and infidelity. That's straightforward. Second, we report the fraudulent use of your business loan to the bank that's clearly theft since your name alone was on the application. Third, we contact the police about this Kenton Murray character and his so-called investment company. Jack nodded, absorbing the information. What about the money from our joint accounts? The college fund? Margot's expression tightened. That's trickier. Since Rose had legal access to those accounts, it's not technically theft in the eyes of the law. But, she added, seeing Jack's frown, in a divorce proceeding, unauthorized clearing of joint assets can result in a judgment against her. We can make a strong case that she should repay those funds. If she has anything left to repay, Jack muttered. Exactly. Margot tapped her pen against the desk. Which is why we need to move quickly. How much remains in your accounts now? About $12,000 in savings. Another $5,000 in checking. Transfer it, Margot said immediately. Today. Move it to a new account in your name only. Do it legally, keep records, but protect what's left. Jack hesitated. Won't that look bad? If we go to court? Not under these circumstances. You're protecting family assets from further misappropriation. Margot scribbled a note to herself. Has Rose contacted you at all since leaving? No, not even Reed. That works in our favor too. Margot looked up, her eyes sharp. Mr. Merrick, I need to ask you a difficult question. What's your end goal here? Do you want reconciliation, or are you looking to sever all ties? Jack didn't hesitate. I want justice. I want to protect my son and what's left of our future. I don't want Rose back, not after this. Margot nodded, seeming satisfied with his answer. Then we'll proceed accordingly. I'll file the paperwork today, and we'll set things in motion. In the meantime, document everything. And be prepared, Rose will likely return when the money runs out. When she does, do not let her back into your home. I've already changed the locks, Jack said, that a small smile crossed Margot's face. Good. Now, about custody of your son. By the time Jack left the lawyer's office, a weight had shifted from his shoulders. Not disappeared, the betrayal still sat heavy in his chest, but transformed into something manageable. A problem with a solution that he drove directly to the bank, where he transferred their remaining funds as Margot had instructed. Then he stopped by a shop to check on things before heading home. Reed was in the driveway when he arrived, working under the hood of the old Ford. The boy looked up as Jack's truck pulled in. "How'd it go?" Reed asked, wiping his hands on a rag. Jack filled him in on the lawyer's advice and the steps he'd taken, careful to stick to the facts without editorializing. Reed listened intently, nodding occasionally. "So it's really happening," Reed said when Jack finished. "You're divorcing her?" "Yes," Jack confirmed. "Is that okay with you?" Reed shrugged, but the gesture wasn't casual. "It's the right move, especially now that we know about this Kenton guy." Jack studied his son, noting the tension in his shoulders. "This isn't how I wanted things to turn out, Reed. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle." "I'm not in the middle," Reed said firmly. "I'm on your side. She's the one who left us, who stole from us." He turned back to the engine. "Hand me that wrench, would you?" Jack passed him the tool, recognizing the deflection for what it was. They worked side by side on the truck for the next hour, the familiar routine of mechanical work easing some of the day's tension. Later, as the sun began to set, they sat on the front porch steps, taking a break. "Dad," Reed said, breaking a comfortable silence. "What happens now? With the house and everything?" "We stay put," Jack replied. "The house is in both our names, but with the divorce filing and her abandonment, we've got every right to be here. Margot says we're in a strong position legally." Reed nodded, seeming relieved. "Good. I don't want to move schools my junior year." Jack put a hand on his son's shoulder. "You won't have to. I promise." They watched the sunset in silence for a while, the January air growing colder as darkness fell. "She hasn't even called," Reed said finally, his voice smaller than usual. "Not even to check if I'm okay." The hurt in his son's voice renewed Jack's anger. Whatever issues Rose had with their marriage, to abandon her child this way was unforgivable. "Her loss," Jack said firmly. "You're the best thing that ever happened to either of us. If she can't see that, it's on her." Reed didn't respond, but he leaned slightly into Jack's shoulder, a silent acknowledgement that the words had been heard and maybe even believed. The Sunday evening crowd at the last stop filled the bar with a low, steady hum of conversation. Jack sat at the corner of the bar, watching Jules Rivera talk animatedly with Rudy. The three of them had gathered to discuss next steps now that Jack had set the legal proceedings in motion. "The lawyer's good," Jack said, finishing his explanation of Margot's plan. "But criminal charges against Kenton will be tough without evidence." "You need more than just a receipt," Reed found. Jules asked. "Much more," Jack confirmed. "We need proof that Kenton knowingly defrauded Rose, that there was no legitimate investment, and ideally, evidence that this is his pattern." Rudy rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "My contact at the sheriff's office says they've been trying to build a case against him for months. Problem is, the women he targets are too embarrassed to come forward. Or they protect him, thinking he's coming back." Jules tapped her fingers against a glass. "What about Maribel, Rose's mother? You said you think she's involved." "She had to be," Jack replied. "Rose never made a major decision without consulting her. And Maribel's always pushed her to want more, bigger house, better neighborhood, fancier lifestyle. Perfect target for a guy like Kenton," Rudy agreed. "Promised them both the high life." Jules leaned forward, her expression intent. "I might be able to help. My cousin works at Riverbank Credit Union. That's where Maribel banks. If she's been making unusual deposits." Jack shook his head. "That's crossing a line, Jules. I appreciate it, but I don't want anyone risking their job over this." "We don't need to break any laws," Rudy interjected. "We just need to be ready when Rose and Maribel inevitably come crawling back. Because they will." Jack took a sip of his beer. "What makes you so sure?" "Because con men like Kenton don't stick around once they've gotten what they want," Rudy explained. "And from what we know, they've already handed over at least 50 grand. That's a good haul. He'll be looking to disappear soon, if he hasn't already." The thought gave Jack no satisfaction. Rose deserved whatever heartbreak came her way, but the money Reed's college fund, the business loan that loss cut deep. "So what's the plan?" Jules asked. "Just wait for them to show up broke and desperate." "Not quite," Jack replied. "I want to be ready. Set things up so we have leverage when they come back." He turned to Rudy. "I need cameras, inside and outside the house. If Rose tries to get in or causes a scene, I want it documented. Rudy nodded. I can hook you up. Got a buddy who installs security systems. I want to talk to your cousin, Jack said to Jules. Not to access accounts or anything illegal. Just to be on alert if Maribel comes in trying to move money around. Done, Jules agreed. Anything else? Jack thought for a moment. One more thing. I need a full accounting of everything Rose took. Bank statements, credit card receipts, everything. If we can prove where the money went, it'll strengthen our case. I've got a friend who's an accountant, Jules offered. She could help organize everything for the lawyer. Jack felt a surge of gratitude for these friends who'd stepped up without hesitation. I appreciate all this. More than I can say. That's what friends are for, Jules replied simply. Besides, I never liked how Rose treated you these past few years. Always looking down on the shop on what you built. She shook her head. Some people don't recognize value when it's right in front of them. The comment struck Jack unexpectedly. It was true Rose had increasingly dismissed his work, his accomplishments, as somehow lesser. Too blue-collar. Too small-town. Not enough. Their loss, Rudy said, raising his glass. To new beginnings. They clinked glasses, a quiet toast to the uncertain future. The next day, Jack met with Rudy's security contact and had cameras installed at the house 2 outside, covering the front and back entrances and one discreetly placed in the living room. The system would alert his phone if anyone approached the house. Reed watched the installation with interest. You really think Mom will try to break in? Not break in, Jack clarified, but she might show up demanding to be let in. I want everything documented. Reed nodded, understanding the precaution. Smart. That night, while Reed was upstairs doing homework, Jack spread bank statements across the kitchen table. He meticulously highlighted every suspicious transaction from the past year, large withdrawals, unusual transfers, unexplained expenses. The pattern was clearer now that he knew what to look for. Small amounts at first, growing larger as Rose became bolder. The betrayal had been calculated. Long-term, not a sudden temptation or a moment of weakness, but a deliberate campaign to drain their accounts before leaving. Jack's phone buzzed with a text from Jules. Talk to my cousin. Maribel made 3 large cash deposits in November. 10 grand each time. No explanation. The confirmation only deepened Jack's resolve. This wasn't just about Rose anymore. This was about taking down everyone involved in the scheme. He texted back. Thanks. Keep me posted if anything new comes up. Then he called Margot Ellison and updated her on the new information. The lawyer sounded grimly satisfied. This strengthens our case considerably, she said, especially if we can prove Maribel's involvement. I've drafted the divorce papers and filed them with the court. Rose will be served as soon as she returns to the state. And the fraud charges? Jack asked. I've spoken with a detective in the white-collar crimes unit. They're interested, especially given the pattern with other victims. But they need more concrete evidence. I'm working on it, Jack promised. He hung up feeling more centered than he had in days. The plan was coming together. All that remained was waiting for Rose and Maribel to return, which, according to Rudy's prediction, wouldn't be long. Jack cleared the papers from the table and went upstairs to check on Reed. The boy was at his desk, textbooks open, but he wasn't studying. Instead, he stared out the window at the dark January night. Everything okay? Jack asked from the doorway. Reed turned. Just thinking about how much Mom changed. Reed fiddled with a pencil. She used to be different. When I was little, happier. Jack leaned against the doorframe, choosing his words carefully. People change, Reed. Sometimes not for the better. But that's on them, not on us. Reed nodded slowly. I know. I just keep wondering when it started. When she decided we weren't enough. The question hit Jack hard because he'd been wondering the same thing. When had Rose's dissatisfaction taken root? When had she decided that their life together was something to escape rather than cherish? I don't know, Jack admitted. But I do know this: you are more than enough. Don't ever let anyone make you feel otherwise. Reed managed a small smile. Thanks, Dad. Jack stepped into the room and squeezed his son's shoulder. Get some sleep. School tomorrow. He returned downstairs, checking that all the doors were locked, the security system armed. Everything was in place. Now, they just had to wait for Rose to make her move. 4 days later, Jack's phone buzzed with an alert from the security system. Someone was at the front door. He was at the shop, elbow deep in a transmission rebuild. Quickly wiping his hands, he pulled out his phone and checked the camera feed. Rose and Maribel stood on the porch. Rose looked disheveled, her normally perfect hair windblown, her expression a mixture of frustration and desperation as she repeatedly pressed the doorbell. Maribel, elegant even in distress, kept glancing over her shoulder toward the street. They'd returned, just as Rudy had predicted. Jack dialed Reed's number. His son was at Rudy's bar, where he'd started helping out a few afternoons a week. "They're back," Jack said when Reed answered. "At the house. I'm heading there now." "I'm coming too," Reed replied immediately. "No," Jack said firmly. "Stay with Rudy. I'll handle this." "But Dad." "Reed," Jack cut him off. "Trust me on this. It'll be easier if you're not there for this part. I'll call you after." A pause, then a reluctant "fine, but call me the second they leave. Promise." Jack hung up and turned to Jules, who'd been working on a car across the bay. "I need to go. Family situation." Jules nodded, understanding immediately. "Go. We got this covered." 20 minutes later, Jack pulled into his driveway. Rose's car, the SUV he'd bought her 2 years ago, was parked haphazardly at the curb. Through the windshield, he could see suitcases piled in the back seat. Rose and Maribel still stood on the porch, now arguing with each other in hushed but intense voices. They fell silent as Jack approached, both turning toward him with manufactured smiles. "Jack," Rose said, stepping toward him. "Thank God you're home. We've been knocking for." "Save it," Jack interrupted, stopping several feet away. He studied his wife, noting the designer clothes that now looked rumpled, the carefully applied makeup that couldn't quite hide her exhaustion. "What are you doing here, Rose?" Her smile faltered. We live here, Jack. Where else would I go?" "Wherever you've been for the past 8 days would be my guess." Jack kept his voice even controlled. "Or wherever the $60,000 you stole went." Rose flinched. "That's not fair." "I didn't." "Don't." Jack cut her off. "Don't lie. Not anymore." Maribel stepped forward, her expression haughty despite the situation. "Now see here, Jack. Rose has been through a terrible ordeal. That man, Kenton Murray," Jack supplied. "The con artist. The one you helped introduce to your daughter. The one you both gave our money to." He turned his gaze to his mother-in-law. "Did you get your cut, Maribel? Or did he scam you too?" Maribel's face reddened. "How dare you accuse me?" "Stop it, Mother," Rose interjected, her facade cracking. "Just stop." She turned pleading eyes to Jack. "Please, can we talk inside? It's freezing out here." "No." Jack's response was immediate. "You don't live here anymore, Rose. The locks have been changed." "What?" Rose's eyes widened. "You can't do that. This is my house too." Jack corrected. "Before you abandoned your family, stole a business loan, emptied our son's college fund, and ran off with a con man." He pulled out his phone, showing her the screen. "It's all documented. Every withdrawal, every lie." Rose's expression shifted from shock to calculation. "Jack, please. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I see that now. But we can fix this. For Reed's sake." "Don't." Jack's voice turned hard. "Don't use our son as a shield. You didn't care about him when you took his future." "That's not true." Rose's eyes filled with tears. "I love Reed. I was confused, manipulated. Kenton said the investment would triple our money. For Reed's education, for our retirement. And you believed him," Jack said flatly, "without discussing it with me, without checking if the company was legitimate, without thinking about what would happen if you were wrong." Rose's tears spilled over. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, Jack. I've lost everything. Kenton's gone, the money's gone. All of it." Jack asked, feeling a cold anger solidify in his chest. $60,000, gone in a week? Rose looked away, unable to meet his gaze. The investment wasn't real. Kenton disappeared 3 days ago. Took everything. Behind her, Maribel sniffed loudly. "We've been staying in hotels, trying to track him down. But he's vanished." "Not your problem anymore," Jack said. "And neither is this house." Rose stepped forward, reaching for him. "Jack, please. Where am I supposed to go? I have nothing left." Jack stepped back, avoiding her touch. "Should have thought of that before you betrayed everything we built." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. My lawyer said to give you this. Divorce papers. You've been served. Rose stared at the envelope as if it might burn her. Divorce? Jack, no. We can work this out. I made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. Jack interrupted. What you did was a choice. Multiple choices over months. And now you're facing the consequences. You can't be serious, Maribel broke in. After 20 years of marriage, you're throwing everything away over one indiscretion? Jack turned to his mother-in-law, letting his contempt show. Stealing $60,000 isn't an indiscretion, Maribel. It's a crime. One the police are very interested in. The color drained from both women's faces. The police. Rose whispered. Fraud investigation, Jack confirmed. They're building a case against Kenton Murray, and against anyone who helped him. Maribel grabbed Rose's arm. He's bluffing. He wouldn't involve the police. Already have, Jack said calmly. Filed a report 3 days ago. Detective Wilson from the White Collar Crimes Unit. Feel free to call him. He pulled out a business card and held it out. Rose stared at the card but didn't take it. Jack, please. I never meant to hurt you or Reed. I thought I was securing our future. By leaving? By stealing. Jack shook his head. Save the excuses for court. He glanced at his watch. My lawyer will be here in 20 minutes. You can talk to her about the terms of the divorce. But you're not coming inside. Where's Reed? Rose asked suddenly. I need to see him to explain. He doesn't want to see you, Jack said flatly. His choice, not mine. The word seemed to hit Rose harder than anything else. She swayed slightly, her face crumpling. He's my son, the son whose future you stole, Jack reminded her. He knows everything, Rose. About the affair, about the money, about all of it. You turned him against me, Maribel accused. Jack laughed without humor. Didn't have to. You did that yourselves. He stepped around them and unlocked the front door. Before entering, he turned back one last time. I suggest you use the next 20 minutes to think about what you're going to say to my lawyer. She doesn't have much patience for liars. With that, Jack went inside and closed the door firmly behind him. Through the front window, he watched Rose collapse onto the porch steps, head in her hands, while Maribel paced furiously. He felt no satisfaction, no triumph, just a cold certainty that he was doing what needed to be done. For himself, and for Reed. Jack watched through the window as a sleek black sedan pulled into the driveway. Margot Ellison stepped out, briefcase in hand, her expression all business as she approached Rose and Maribel on the porch. He opened the door before Margot could knock. Thanks for coming on short notice. Of course, the lawyer replied, her voice crisp. She nodded toward Rose and Maribel. I see our timing was good. Jack led Margot into the living room, where they had a clear view of the front porch through the window. Rose and Maribel remained outside, huddled in conversation. They showed up about half an hour ago, Jack explained. Just like you predicted. No money, no Kenton. Margot set her briefcase on the coffee table. Did you serve the papers? Yes. Rose didn't take it well. They never do. Margot opened her briefcase and extracted a folder. I've prepared everything as we discussed. The divorce complaint cites abandonment, infidelity, and financial misconduct. I've also drafted a temporary order regarding the house and remaining assets. Jack nodded. What about Reed? Given that he's 16, the court will take his preference into consideration. Has he expressed a clear wish to remain with you? Absolutely, Jack confirmed. He doesn't even want to see Rose right now. That simplifies things, Margot said, making a note. Now, regarding the financial fraud, a sharp knocking interrupted them. Rose's voice carried through the door. Jack, we need to talk. Please. Margot raised an eyebrow. Shall we? Jack steeled himself and opened the door. Rose stood alone, Maribel now waiting by the car. My lawyer's here, Jack said flatly. Anything you need to say can be said to both of us. Rose's eyes flicked to Margot, then back to Jack. I'd rather speak privately. That's not happening, Jack replied. Margot stepped forward. Mrs. Merrick, I'm Margot Ellison, your husband's attorney. I understand you've been served with divorce papers. If you have questions about the proceedings, I'm happy to explain, but all communication should go through proper legal channels from this point forward. Rose's expression hardened. I don't need explanations. I need my husband to be reasonable. This is still my home, and Reed is still my son. Actually, Margot interjected smoothly. The court may take a different view, given the circumstances of your departure and the financial irregularities. Financial irregularities? Rose repeated incredulously. That's what you're calling it? I made a bad investment. You stole a business loan issued solely in your husband's name. Margot corrected. That's fraud. You also emptied joint accounts and your son's college fund without consultation or consent. That's financial misconduct that will significantly impact the division of assets and the custody arrangement. Rose's face flushed. You've painted me as some kind of criminal. Jack, this isn't who we are. 20 years of marriage, and you're treating me like a stranger. You became a stranger, Jack said quietly, the moment you chose him over us. A car door slammed, drawing their attention. Reed had arrived, stepping out of Rudy's truck at the curb. The boy hesitated when he saw the assembled group on the porch, then squared his shoulders and approached. Rose's expression transformed instantly. Reed, oh, honey, I'm so glad to see you. She moved toward him, arms outstretched. Reed stopped several feet away, hands shoved in his pockets. Mom, he acknowledged, his voice neutral. Baby, I've missed you so much, Rose continued, voice breaking. I need to explain what happened. It's not what your father is making it out to be. Reed's expression remained unmoved. You mean you didn't take my college money and run off with some guy? Rose flinched. It wasn't like that. I thought I was making a smart investment for our future. For your future, right? Reed's voice dripped with sarcasm. That's why you didn't tell Dad about it. That's why you left on Christmas Eve with just a note. I was confused, Rose insisted. Kenton, he made everything sound so perfect. He said we'd triple our money in months. We could move to a bigger house in a better neighborhood. You could go to any college you wanted. I didn't want any of that, Reed said flatly. I was happy here, with Dad. Rose's desperate smile faltered. Reed, please. I'm still your mother. I made a terrible mistake, but we can fix this. If you just tell your father. Tell him what? Reed interrupted. That he should forgive you? Take you back. He shook his head. Not happening, Mom. You already picked your side. The words hit Rose like a physical blow. She stepped back, tears streaming down her face. You don't mean that. Your father's turned you against me. Reed's laugh was harsh, so adult it made Jack's chest ache. Dad never said a bad word about you. Not even after you left. Not even after we found out what you did. He glanced at his father, then back to Rose. I made up my own mind, and I'm staying with Dad. From the car, Maribel called out, Rose, this is ridiculous. They've clearly conspired against you. We should go. Reed turned toward his grandmother. Yeah, you should. Both of you. Maribel's face contorted with anger. She marched up the walkway, finger pointed accusingly at Jack. This is your doing. You've poisoned my grandson against his own mother, his own family. That's enough. Margot stepped between them. Mrs. Wallace, I suggest you return to the vehicle before you say something that could be construed as threatening. Maribel ignored the lawyer, focusing her fury on Jack. You think you've won? This isn't over. Rose deserves half of everything you own, and I'll make sure she gets it. She lunged forward suddenly, hand raised as if to strike Jack. Before she could make contact, another figure appeared, stepping swiftly between them. Gwen Merritt gripped Maribel's wrist firmly, her expression fierce. Not today, she said, voice dangerously quiet. And no one had noticed Gwen's arrival. Jack's sister must have pulled up during the confrontation. She stood now like a shield, her nursing scrubs still on from her shift, her stance unwavering. Get your hands off me, Maribel hissed, trying to pull away. Gwen released her, but didn't step back. Touch my brother again, and I'll have you charged with assault. Now back up. Maribel glared at the assembled group. Jack, Reed, Gwen, and Margot all standing together against her. Something in her seemed to deflate as she recognized the united front. Rose, she snapped. We're leaving. Rose looked desperately at Reed one last time. Please, honey, think about what you're doing. Reed met her gaze steadily. I have. Goodbye, Mom. The finality in his tone left no room for argument. Rose's shoulders slumped as she turned away, following her mother back to the car. Margot watched them go, then turned to Jack. That actually went better than expected. No physical assault, no breaking and entering. Thanks to Gwen, Jack said, putting an arm around his sister's shoulders. Gwen squeezed his hand. Rudy called me. Said things might get heated over here. Reed stood silently, watching his mother's car pull away from the curb. His expression was hard to read, not sad. Exactly, but thoughtful. You okay? Jack asked quietly. Reed nodded. Yeah, better than I thought I'd be. He turned to face his father. I meant what I said. I'm not going with her. Not now, not ever. Jack pulled his son into a brief, fierce hug. You don't have to. That's a promise. Over Reed's shoulder, Jack exchanged looks with Gwen and Margot. The confrontation was over, but the battle had just begun. Rose wouldn't give up so easily, not with Maribel pushing her. But for the first time since finding that note on Christmas Eve, Jack felt truly certain they would win. 6 weeks later, Jack stood in the newly renovated office of Merrick Auto Repair, surveying the improvements with quiet satisfaction. The loan he'd secured before Christmas, the one Rose had stolen, had been replaced by a better offer from a different bank, with a lower interest rate and longer terms. The money had gone into upgrading the shop's diagnostic equipment and expanding the customer waiting area. Business was better than ever. Turned out, the community had rallied around him once word of Rose's betrayal spread. Loyalty still meant something in Pineville. A knock at the door frame drew his attention. Reed stood there, dressed for his part-time job at the last stop, where Rudy had hired him to help out 3 afternoons a week. Heading out, Reed said. Place looks good. Jack nodded, taking in the changes in his son over the past weeks. Reed stood taller, spoke more confidently. The initial hurt of Rose's abandonment had hardened into something like resolve. He was growing up fast, too fast, maybe, but Jack couldn't help but feel proud of the young man his son was becoming. Thanks for helping with the painting this weekend, Jack said. Reed shrugged. No big deal. Besides, I like the new color better. The walls, once a dingy beige Rose had always complained about, were now a deep blue that made the space feel both professional and welcoming. You need a ride to Rudy's? Jack asked. Nah, Jules is dropping me off on her way to pick up parts. Reed hesitated. Hey, Dad, have you heard anything more about, Jack knew what he was asking. News about Rose, about the divorce proceedings, about Kenton Murray and the money. Actually, yes, Jack said, moving to his desk where his phone lay. Just got a text from Margot this morning. Might interest you. He pulled up the message and handed the phone to Reed. The boy read it, eyes widening slightly. They arrested him? For real? Jack nodded. In Seattle. Apparently, he tried the same scam on a woman whose brother is a detective. Bad luck for him. And the money? Reed asked, handing the phone back. Jack sighed. Most of it's gone. Spent or hidden away. But Margot says there's a chance we might recover some during restitution after his trial. Especially since we helped build the case against him. The evidence Jack had gathered, bank statements, the receipt Reed had found, security footage of Rose and Maribel's return had been instrumental in the police investigation. Detective Wilson had personally called to thank him for his cooperation. What about Mom and Grandma? Reed asked, his voice carefully neutral. Your mother agreed to Margot's terms yesterday, Jack said. Full custody to me, no alimony, and she assumes responsibility for the stolen business loan. The college fund, that's still complicated, but at least she's not fighting anymore. What Jack didn't say was that Rose's capitulation had come after Maribel suffered a minor heart attack, a wake-up call that had apparently shaken both women. According to Gwen, who still had contacts at the hospital, Rose had moved into a small apartment in Westridge and taken a job at a department store. Humbled, finally, by the consequences of her choices. She hasn't called, Reed noted. Not since that day on the porch. Do you want her to? Jack asked carefully. Reed considered the question longer than Jack expected. Not yet, he said finally. Maybe someday, but not now. Jack nodded, respecting his son's decision. Whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready. No pressure either way. Reed smiled slightly. Thanks. He glanced at his watch. Should go. Don't want to keep Jules waiting. Smart move, Jack agreed. Jules had become a regular presence in their lives these past weeks, dropping by with dinner when Jack worked late, teaching Reed about engines on weekends, her practical kindness a balm during the difficult transition. Jack found himself looking forward to her visits more than he was ready to admit. Reed headed for the door, then paused. "Dad, I'm proud of you. For not giving in. For fighting back." The simple words hit Jack with unexpected force. "Thanks, son. That means a lot." Reed nodded once, then disappeared into the main part of the shop. Jack heard Jules's cheerful greeting, followed by Reed's deeper reply and the sound of the exit door chiming. Alone in his office, Jack opened his desk drawer and removed the folded note that had started everything Rose's goodbye on Christmas Eve. He'd kept it as a reminder, a talisman against weakness during the legal battle. Now, with Kinnan arrested and the divorce terms settled, the note seemed less powerful. Just words on paper, written by someone who had never truly seen or appreciated what she had. Jack refolded it carefully and placed it back in the drawer. Not to keep this time, but to discard properly when he got home. Some chapters needed to be closed completely. His phone buzzed with a text from Rudy. "Celebratory drinks tonight? News calls for it." Jack smiled and typed back, "Definitely." 7 p.m. "Perfect," came the reply, bringing that special reserve whiskey. Jack set the phone down, feeling the weight of the past weeks lift slightly. The road ahead wouldn't be easy rebuilding their finances, helping Reed process his mother's betrayal, learning to trust again himself. But for the first time, Jack could see beyond the immediate crisis to a future that held promise. That he moved to the window, looking out at the shop where his employees worked efficiently on various vehicles. The business he'd built with his own hands. The legacy he would pass to Reed someday, if the boy wanted it. Some might see it as small, limited. Rose certainly had. But Jack saw something else, something solid and real. Something built to last. Outside, spring was coming. The cold season was finally ending.